The Forest Unseen, A Year's Watch in Nature by David Haskell, published in 2012. This is the first chapter of a longer nonfiction work, and in it, Haskell refers to a stretch of forest as a mandala. January 1st, Partnerships. The new year starts with a thaw, and the fat, wet smell of the woods fills my nose. Moisture has plumped the mat of fallen leaves that covers the forest floor, and the air is suffused with succulent, leafy aromas. I leave the foot trail that winds down the forest slope and scramble around a house-sized piece of mossy, eroded rock. Across a shallow bowl on the mountainside, I see my landmark, a long boulder cresting out of the leaf litter like a small whale. This block of sandstone defines one edge of the mandala. It takes me a few minutes to traverse the rocky scree and reach the boulder. I step past a large hickory tree, resting my hand on its gray strips of bark, and the mandala is at my feet. I circle to the opposite side and take my seat on a flat rock. After pausing to inhale the rich air, I settle in to watch. The leaf litter is mottled with browns. A few bare spice bush stems and a young ash stand waist-high at the mandala's center. The muted, leathery colors of these decaying leaves and dormant plants are eclipsed by the glow coming from the rocks that frame the mandala. These stones are tumbled remnants of the eroding bluff, smoothed into irregular, lumpy forms by thousands of years of erosion. The rocks range in size from woodchuck to elephant. Most are about as big as a curled-up human. Their radiance comes not from stone, but from mantles of lichen that blush emerald, jade, and pearl in the humid air. The lichen's growth forms mountains in miniature, sandstone crags with variegated patches of moisture and sunlight. The highest ridges on the boulders are spattered with tuft-skinned gray flakes. Dark canyons between rocks have a purple sheen. Turquoise glistens on vertical walls, and concentric circles of lime flow down gentle slopes. All the lichen's hues are paint-stroke fresh. This vibrancy contrasts with the winter-weighted lethargy of the rest of the forest. Even the mosses are muted and frost-bleached. Supple physiology allows lichens to shine with life when most other creatures are locked down for the winter. Lichens master the cold months through the paradox of surrender. They burn no fuel in quest of warmth, instead letting the pace of their lives rise and fall with the thermometer. Lichens don't cling to water as plants and animals do. A lichen body swells on damp days, then puckers as the air dries. Plants shrink back from the chill, packing up their cells until spring gradually coaxes them out. Lichen cells are light sleepers. When winter eases for a day, lichen floats easily back to life. This approach to life has been independently discovered by others. In the 4th century BCE, the Chinese Taoist philosopher Zhuangzi wrote of an old man tossed in the tumult at the base of a tall waterfall. Terrified onlookers rushed to his aid, but the man emerged unharmed and calm. When asked how he could survive this ordeal, he replied, "Acquiescence. I accommodate myself to the water, not the water to me." Lichens found this wisdom 400 million years before the Taoists. The true masters of victory through submission in Zhuangzi's allegory were the lichens clinging to the rock walls around the waterfall. The quietude and outer simplicity of the lichens hides the complexity of their inner lives. Lichens are amalgams of two creatures, a fungus and either an alga or bacterium. The fungus spreads the strands of its body over the ground and provides a welcoming bed. The alga or bacterium nestles inside these strands and uses the sun's energy to assemble sugar and other nutritious molecules. As in any marriage, both partners are changed by their union. The fungus body spreads out, turning itself into a structure similar to a tree leaf, a protective upper crust, a layer for the light-capturing algae, and tiny pores for breathing. The algal partner loses its cell wall, surrenders protection to the fungus, and gives up sexual activities in favor of faster but less genetically exciting self-cloning. Lichenous fungi can be grown in the lab without their partners, but these widows are malformed and sickly. Similarly, algae and bacteria from lichens can generally survive without their fungal partners, but only in a restricted range of habitats. By stripping off the bonds of individuality, the lichens have produced a world-conquering union. They cover nearly 10% of the land's surface, especially in the treeless far north, where winter reigns for most of the year. Even here, in a tree-filled mandala in Tennessee, every rock, trunk, and twig is crusted with lichen. Some biologists claim that the fungi are exploiters, ensnaring their algal victims. This interpretation fails to see that the lichen partners have ceased to be individuals, surrendering the possibility of drawing a line between oppressor and oppressed. Like a farmer tending her apple trees and her field of corn, a lichen is a melding of lives. Once individuality dissolves, the scorecard of victors and victims makes little sense. Is corn oppressed? Does the farmer's dependence on corn make her a victim? These questions are premised on a separation that does not exist. The heartbeat of humans and the flowering of domesticated plants are one life. Alone is not an option. A farmer's physiology is sculpted by a dependence on plants for food that dates back hundreds of millions of years to the first worm-like animals. Domesticated plants have experienced only 10,000 years of life with humans, but they too have shed their independence. Lichens add physical intimacy to this interdependence, fusing their bodies and entwining the membranes of their cells like corn stalks fused with the farmer, bound by evolution's hand. The diversity of color in the lichens on the mandala reflects the many types of algae, bacteria, and fungi involved in the lichens union. Blue or purple lichens contain blue-green bacteria, the cyanobacteria. Green lichens contain algae. Fungi mix their own colors by secreting yellow or silver sunscreen pigments. Bacteria, algae, fungi. Three venerable trunks of the tree of life, twining their pigmented stems. The algae's verdure reflects an older union. Jewels of pigment deep inside algal cells soak up the sun's energy. Through a cascade of chemistry, this energy is transmitted into the bonds that join air molecules into sugar and other food. This sugar powers both the algal cell and its fungal bedfellow. The sun-catching pigments are kept in tiny jewel boxes, chloroplasts, each of which is enclosed in a membrane and comes with its own genetic material. The bottle green chloroplasts are descendants of bacteria that took up residence inside algal cells 1.5 billion years ago. The bacterial tenants gave up their tough outer coats, their sexuality, and their independence, just as algal cells do when they unite with fungi to make lichens. Chloroplasts are not the only bacteria living inside other creatures. All plant, animal, and fungal cells are inhabited by torpedo-shaped mitochondria that function as miniature powerhouses, burning the cell's food to release energy. These mitochondria were also once free-living bacteria and have, like the chloroplasts, given up sex and freedom in favor of partnership. And life's chemical whirl, DNA, bears the mark of yet more ancient union. Our bacterial ancestors shuffled and swapped their genes among species, blending genetic instruction like cooks copying from one another's recipe cards. Occasionally, two chefs would agree to a whole-scale merger, and two species fused into one. The DNA of modern organisms, including our own, retains traces of such mergers. Although our genes function as one unit, they come with two or more subtly different writing styles, vestiges of the different species that united billions of years ago. The tree of life is a poor metaphor. The deepest parts of our genealogies resemble networks or deltas, much more interweaving and cross-flow. We are Russian dolls, our lives made possible by other lives within us. But whereas dolls can be taken apart, our cellular and genetic helpers cannot be separated from us, nor we from them. We are lichens on a grand scale. Union, fusion. The mandala's inhabitants are plated into winning partnerships. But cooperation is not the only relationship in the forest. Piracy and exploitation are here also. A reminder of these more painful associations lies coiled on the leaf litter at the center of the mandala, enclosed by the lichen-coated rocks. The reminder unwrapped itself slowly, held back by the torpidity of my powers of observation. My attention was first drawn by two amber ants bustling across the wet leaf litter. I watched their scurrying for half an hour before I noticed the ants' particular interest in a coiled strand nested in the litter. The strand was about as long as my hand and was the same rain-soaked brown as the hickory leaf on which it lay. At first, I dismissed the curl as an old vine tendril or leaf stem. But as my eyes were about to move on to more stimulating things, an ant paddled the tendril with her antennae, and the coil straightened and lurched. My mind started into recognition. A horsehair worm. A strange creature with a taste for exploitation. The worm's twisting gave away its identity. Horsehair worms are pressurized from within, and the tug of muscles against this inflated body make the worm jerk and writhe like no other animal. The worm has no need of complicated or graceful movement, for at this stage of its life it has only two tasks left, to squirm towards a mate and then to lay its eggs. Nor did the worm need to have sophisticated motion in its previous life stage, when it lay balled inside the body of a cricket. The cricket did the worm's walking and feeding. The horsehair worm lived as an internal brigand, robbing then killing the cricket. The worm's life cycle began when it hatched from an egg laid in a puddle or stream. The microscopic larva crawled over the stream bed until it was eaten by a snail or small insect. Once inside its new home, the larva wrapped itself in a protective coat, formed a cyst, then waited. The lives of most larvae are cut short at this point, as cysts, never completing the rest of its life cycle. The worm in the mandala was one of the few that make it to the next stage. Its host crawled onto land, died, and was chewed on by an omnivorous cricket. This is such an improbable sequence of events that the horsehair worm's life cycle requires parent worms to lay tens of millions of eggs. On average, only one or two of this multitude of young will survive to adulthood. Once inside the cricket, the spiny-headed larval pirate bored through the gut wall and took up residence in the hold, where it grew from a comma-sized larva to a worm the length of my hand, coiling upon itself to fit within the cricket. When the worm could grow no more, it released chemicals that took over the cricket's brain. The chemicals turned the water-fearing cricket into a suicidal diver seeking puddles or streams. As soon as the cricket hit water, the horsehair worm tensed its strong muscles, ripped through the cricket's body wall, and twisted free, leaving the plundered vessel to sink and die. Once free, the horsehair worms have an appetite for company, and they mate in untidy skeins of tens or hundreds of worms. This habit has given them a second name, Gordian worms, after the 8th century legend of King Gordius's monstrously complex knot. Whoever could unbind the knot would succeed the king, but all would-be rulers failed. It took another pirate, Alexander the Great, to loose the knot. Like the worms, he cheated his hosts, slashing the knot with his sword and claiming the country's crown. After the Gordian mating tangle is sated, the worms unwrap and crawl away. They lodge their eggs in soggy pond margins and damp forest floors. Once hatched, the worm larva will pick up the Alexandrian plunderer's spirit, first infecting a snail, then emerging to rob a cricket. The horsehair worm's relationship with its hosts is entirely exploitative. Its victims receive no hidden benefit or compensation for their suffering. But even this parasitic worm is sustained by an interior crowd of mitochondria. Piracy is powered by collaboration. Taoist union, farmers' dependence, Alexandrian pillage. Relationships in the mandala come in multifarious blended hues. The line between bandit and honest citizen is not as easily drawn as it first seems. Indeed, evolution has drawn no line. All life melds plunder and solidarity. Parasitic brigands are nourished by cooperative mitochondria within. Algae suffuse emerald from ancient bacteria and surrender inside gray fungal walls. Even the chemical ground of life, DNA, is a maypole of color, a Gordian knot of relationships.